Carrillo Bay, California, 7:18 p.m. The last light of day was fading over the hills that sloped down to the sea, casting a pale gold over the small town like an old photograph. Theo Maddox stood on the porch of the wooden house he had rented less than half a day ago, holding a cup of black coffee that had gone lukewarm in his hand. His eyes were fixed on the narrow road leading down to the bay. The wind blowing in from the ocean carried the sharp, salty tang, but there was no sense of relaxation in him, no vacation feeling at all. He had come here with his daughter Mia, who was 6 years old, not to enjoy the beach or the quiet. He had come to escape the noise inside his head. 3 years earlier, his wife Caroline had died from complications after a sudden bout of pneumonia. In just 12 days, what started as a normal fever had taken her away from him and Mia, as if someone had yanked her right out of their lives. Since then, Theo had lived on a rigid schedule of responsibility and routine. He woke at 5, every morning worked remotely. As a crisis negotiation consultant, made breakfast, took Mia to school, handled high-stakes calls that clients paid top dollar for him to deliver the right words in the worst moments, and then came home to be both father and mother. He could not remember the last time he had truly relaxed. That was why he had chosen this rented house perched alone on the hillside with a clear view of the sea. He hoped that over the next 2 months Mia could play in the sand and leave some of her sadness behind while he learned how to breathe without tensing every muscle. But Carrillo Bay was not giving him peace. He spotted the patrol car while it was still far down the road. No sirens blared. Only the soft spin of red and blue lights reflected off the windows of neighboring houses like a silent warning. The vehicle stopped right in front of his gate. The door opened, and a female officer stepped out, walking straight up the stone path toward the porch. Theo did not rush down. He set his coffee cup on the railing and watched how she moved. 15 years of dealing with desperate, aggressive, or suicidal people had taught him to read body language before hearing a single word. This woman was not approaching like someone on a routine check. She moved like someone who had been betrayed too many times to believe tonight would be simple. "Sir." Her voice rang out, firm and low, trained not to need repetition. "Step away from the door. Keep your hands where I can see them." Theo placed the cup down, raised both hands to shoulder height, and slowly descended the 3 porch steps. "I'm a legal tenant," he said. "The lease is on the kitchen table. I just picked up the keys this afternoon." She did not lower her guard. "We received a call about a possible break-in. Male, unfamiliar face, dark hair, gray shirt, loitering around the property as if casing it." Theo almost smiled from exhaustion. "I was drinking coffee." Sounds suspicious. For the first time, he saw her face clearly. She was in her early 30s with sharp features, sun-tanned skin, black hair tucked neatly under her police cap, and dark brown eyes so intense they seemed capable of peeling back layers. The name tag on her uniform read, "Officer Elena Cruz." "Turn around. Hands on the vehicle." Theo complied without protest. He knew any wrong reaction now would only make things worse. Elena stepped closer, one hand on his forearm to steady him, the other beginning a professional pat down sides waist jacket pockets. Quick, efficient, no wasted movements. Then she reached his right pants pocket. Her hand froze. Theo felt the change immediately. "I found something," Elena said, but her tone had shifted. It was no longer pure caution. It was something deeper, quieter. She pulled the object from his pocket, a sleek black titanium card holder. Elena flipped it open and stared at the first card inside, falling silent. Theo turned his head slightly over his shoulder. "What is it?" Elena did not answer right away. She looked at him, then back at the card. It read, "Theo Maddox, Special Crisis, Negotiation Consultant." She took half a step closer, close enough that Theo could smell the faint soap scent from her uniform. Then she leaned in her lips near his ear and whispered, just loud enough for him alone to hear. Hard to ignore. Theo frowned. What Elena slowly handed the cardholder back, but her eyes had completely changed. You are the guy who handled the hostage situation in Tacoma last year. It was not a question. It was confirmation. Theo exhaled slowly. I am on leave right now. Elena glanced at the coffee mug on the railing, then at the house, then back at him. The hardness in her posture softened with clear embarrassment. I got the description from dispatch, she admitted. I thought you were someone else. Well, you just searched my pockets to make sure. A short, frustrated laugh escaped her. Yeah. Theo was about to tell her it was fine when another patrol car slowly drove past the end of the street. No lights, no acknowledgement. It moved deliberately slow, observing them both before turning away. Elena watched it disappear, her shoulders tightening once more. In that exact moment, Theo knew the truth. He was not the only one being watched tonight. Perhaps Officer Elena Cruz was the real target all along. 3 days later, Theo Maddox stepped into the only hardware store in the center of Carrillo Bay, carrying an empty basket and a short list in his head. He needed electrical wire and a few stainless steel screws to fix the loose doorbell on the rented house. Mia was safe at the children's library across the street, with Mrs. Nora, the widowed baker, who had taken a quiet liking to the quiet little girl with the sad eyes. Theo had used the hour to handle small repairs, the kind of mindless handwork that let his mind rest for a few minutes. He stood in the electrical aisle comparing 2 spools of wire when a low, mocking voice drifted from the end of the next row. I already told you the file isn't there. If you didn't submit it, that's on you, Cruz. Theo set the spool down and moved quietly to the end of the aisle. Elena Cruz stood at the key-cutting counter, not in uniform today, but in a dark jacket, jeans, and boots. Her black hair fell loose to her shoulders. Facing her was a thick-necked sergeant with stripes on his sleeve-square jaw and the kind of stance that took up space before words ever did. Sergeant Nolan Briggs. The report on the Peterson case is missing. Briggs continued, voice low but loud enough to humiliate. The prosecutor is talking about dropping the charges because the evidence is incomplete. You know who the kid's father is, right? If this blows up, it's going to look like you misplaced the file on purpose. Elena kept her hands at her sides, chin lifted, refusing to step back. I submitted it at 8:03 a.m., she answered evenly. Officer Ruiz witnessed it. Officer Hannah witnessed it too. You're relying on 2 rookies now. Briggs gave a short laugh. That's weak. Theo understood the scene in seconds. This was not a normal work conversation. It was a public power play, designed to force Elena either to snap or to swallow the insult. Either outcome helped Briggs. Theo stepped forward. He did not look at Briggs first. He looked straight at Elena. Officer Cruz, he said, voice carrying just enough to break the rhythm. Good timing. I was going to ask you about the porch camera at the rental house. Elena froze for a fraction of a second, then her eyes sharpened. She caught on instantly. That's right, she replied smoothly. The porch camera. Briggs spun toward him. Who the hell are you, Theo Maddox? He answered calmly. Tenant up on the West Point. Officer Cruz checked the property a few nights ago. We're having a private discussion. Too bad, Theo said, smiling faintly. Because if she submitted the report at 8:03, like she claims, and if my porch camera log shows her pulling back into the station at 8:07, then the problem isn't that she forgot to file it. The problem is that someone removed it from the tray. The aisle went dead silent. Elena did not blink. Briggs did just once, but it was enough. You're interfering in police business, he growled. No. Theo replied, picking up a pack of screws from the shelf. I just hate stories that get told wrong. As if the biggest issue in the world was hardware, he dropped the correct stainless screws into Elena's basket. These are the right ones. Softwood doors will strip with the cheaper kind. Elena looked at him, then not with assessment, but with the stunned relief of someone who had been about to fall and suddenly felt a hand at their back. Briggs had nothing left but a curt warning before he stalked away. When the sergeant was gone, Elena turned to Theo. "You just lied." Theo shrugged. "I built you an exit. It was still a lie. You're still standing here." Elena stared at the screws in her basket. "You even changed my hardware for me. Those were too soft. The old door would have failed by midwinter." She was quiet for several seconds before her voice dropped. "His name is Sergeant Nolan Briggs. For 6 months he's been trying to make me look careless. Missing files, altered logs, shift schedules swapped. Enough small things that I can't prove sabotage, but enough to paint a target on my back." "What does he want?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Night shift Lieutenant Slot. I'm the only one with the seniority to block him." Theo nodded slowly. So his instinct had been right. Elena was not just being watched. She was being systematically dismantled. And he knew men like Briggs. They thrived when the other person reacted one step at a time. They crumbled when someone started building a file. From now on, Theo told her document everything. Everything, every single incident, every moved paper, every changed schedule, every word he says, date, time, witnesses present. Why? Theo held her gaze for a long moment. "So, when he falls, you won't have to tell a story. You'll just open the folder." Elena gripped the basket handle tighter. Then she nodded. And right there in the narrow aisle between the smell of fresh-cut lumber and boxes of nails stacked to the ceiling, the two of them quietly stepped onto the same side of the fight. 2 days later, Theo Maddox's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he watched Mia draw a house by the sea with 3 palm trees and a purple cat at the table. Thursday, 7 p.m., Rosie's Diner. "Bring your notebook." That was all Elena wrote. No greeting, no explanation. Just the time and place like a cop giving orders she knew he would follow. Mia looked up from her crayons. "Dad, you're shaving again." Theo touched his jaw, surprised. He had shaved that morning without thinking. "How do you know these things? Because you only shave when you're meeting the police lady." He laughed quietly, the sound surprising even him. Kids really were terrifying little detectives. "Mrs. Nora is coming over in a few minutes, okay? You can stay with her tonight?" Mia nodded, already back to coloring. "Tell her I said hi." Rosie's Diner sat at the edge of town, the kind of place no one important ever noticed. Vinyl seats cracked from years of use, plastic menus with old coffee stains in the corners, ceiling fans turning too slowly to matter. But that made it perfect. No one watched. No one remembered. Elena was already in the back booth under the flickering neon sign that spelled pie. She wore a charcoal Henley shirt today, hair loose and softer than Theo had ever seen it. No uniform, no badge, no gun belt. But her eyes still worked like a cop's, scanning the door, the customers, the mirror behind the counter. Theo slid into the seat across from her and set his notebook on the table. "Teach me," she said without small talk. "How do I handle someone who spent 6 months trying to erase my name from the system?" Theo poured coffee from the glass pot into both cups. "You're playing the wrong game." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Wrong how you keep explaining every little incident when it happens. You keep defending. You keep reacting." He opened the notebook and wrote 3 big words at the top of the page. "Information is ammunition. Stop doing that." Elena stared at the line, then back at him. "From now on," Theo said, "you don't try to win every round. You build a wall. When it's thick enough, he walks right into it. He sketched a quick diagram, Chief Mallory at the top, Briggs in the middle, the younger officers below. He asked for every name, every shift, every personality. Who feared Briggs? Who listened to Elena, who stayed neutral? She answered, short, precise, and accurate. When people are scared of a guy with stripes, they don't stay loyal, Theo told her. They just stay quiet. Quiet isn't loyalty. Elena leaned back, eyes locked on the diagram. You do this like it's chess. When someone wants to destroy you one small move at a time, only chess keeps up. Food arrived. Elena ordered a burger and fries. Theo started with salad, then switched to a burger after she looked at him like he was judging her entire personality. Halfway through the meal, while Elena was telling him about the widow on Crestline Street who kept her porch light on every night because her addicted son had run away, she suddenly stopped talking. Theo followed her gaze. Outside the glass door stood a boy about 12, thin jacket, too light for the evening chill. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He was just staring inside at the hot plates and the adults eating. Elena didn't say a word. She stood, walked to the counter, paid for 2 extra orders of meatballs and mashed potatoes, then carried the bag out herself. Through the foggy glass, Theo watched her sit down at the boy's level, say something short, and hand him the food. The kid took it and disappeared into the night as if afraid someone would change their mind. Elena came back to the booth like nothing important had happened. Don't look at me like I just saved the world, she said. I'm not. Then what are you thinking? Theo sipped his coffee. That you don't ignore the small things. Elena gave a faint smile. The small things are usually where everything starts to break. Theo didn't answer, but he understood. Just like a child who lost her mother, didn't fall apart in one day. It cracked slowly from the morning she woke up alone, the breakfasts without the right person, the shirts that no longer smelled like home. When they stepped out to the parking lot after dinner, the ocean wind had turned colder. Elena stood beside her pickup truck. Next week again, next week again. She nodded but didn't open the door yet. You know, she said very quietly, since you came to this town, I sleep worse. Theo laughed. That doesn't sound like a thank you? Elena looked at him, the corner of her mouth lifting. Because now I have to figure out whether I should keep leaning on you. The wind moved through the space between them. Theo understood the weight of that sentence was bigger than she wanted to admit. He drove home afterward. The light in Mia's room was still on. She had fallen asleep on the sofa with an unfinished drawing in her arms. He carried her to bed, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and stood watching the soft hair of his daughter for a long time. He had come to Carrillo Bay to find quiet, but now his head was full of Officer Elena Cruz's voice, the way she had carried that bag of food out to the boy, and the question she had left hanging whether she should keep leaning on him. And for the first time in years, Theo realized he no longer wanted to stay in this town just for his daughter. He wanted to stay for the woman, too. The message from Elena arrived at 4:47 p.m. on Monday. No greeting, no explanation. Briggs discovered the camera. He says I fabricated evidence. Hearing on Friday. They're trying to charge me with conduct unbecoming and colluding with a civilian to obstruct internal affairs. Theo read the text and was already on his feet. Mia was at the kitchen table doing her reading homework. Dad, where are you going? I'll be right back. Mrs. Nora will be here in 5 minutes. He didn't wait. When he reached the police station, he found Elena sitting alone on the concrete bench beside the side entrance. She was still in uniform, her back straight, her eyes fixed on a spot on the ground. No tears, no shaking. But the stillness was dangerous. He sat down next to her. Not too close, just close enough for her to know he was there. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Elena spoke first. He called you my boyfriend in the meeting room. Theo tilted his head. Then he said, I made up the story about the car that I dragged a civilian expert in to fake the timeline. He turned you into evidence against me. Theo leaned back on the bench, looking at the gray sky above the station roof. He's not attacking the facts anymore. He's attacking the story around the facts. Elena turned to him. You say that like it's good. It is good, because it means he's afraid of the real part. She laughed dryly. If I lose my badge, I don't see anything good. Theo pulled out his phone, opened a folder, and handed it to her. Inside were 4 scanned files, 3 confirmation emails, and a video clip with official stamps. Elena scanned them, then looked up. What is all this? I filed a public records request for traffic camera footage from last week. Theo pointed to the video. Intersection of Harbor and 5th. 8:47 a.m. The morning your report disappeared. Briggs's car stopped behind the convenience store. He got out holding a blue folder. Elena went rigid. You never told me. I wasn't sure it would amount to anything. I didn't want to give you hope based on something I didn't have yet. She looked back at the screen, her eyes shifting from exhaustion to something sharper. Focused, calculating, alive again. He'll say it's unrelated. Right. So we don't accuse. We just create enough contradiction that they have to open an external investigation. Theo switched to the next file. And this. 6 months of your notes on evidence discrepancies, altered receipts, shift schedules swapped. I cross-referenced everyone with Briggs's duty log. You don't need to prove he stole anything. You just need to make it impossible for them to ignore an audit. Elena stared at the stack of documents as if seeing herself in a new mirror. Not the hunted officer anymore. The one who could finally strike back with something stronger than anger. Why are you still here? She asked, almost a whisper. Theo looked straight at her. Because I found something worth staying for. Elena didn't ask what that meant right away. She only nodded slowly like someone who had just heard the answer she was afraid was true. The next 4 days turned into a campaign. They met every evening. Sometimes at Rosie's diner. Sometimes in Theo's truck parked at the dock. Sometimes in the living room of the rented house after Mia had gone to bed, Elena sitting on the floor with him as they reviewed every possible question that could come up at the hearing. Theo taught her how to answer short, precise, without extra emotion. How not to let Briggs pull her into his territory. How to use one question to force the other side to reveal their motive. In return, Elena taught him other things. She showed him how to stand without ever turning his back completely to a door in a strange place. How to read license plates without staring. How to protect Mia without scaring her. And in the short breaks between the tension, she told him stories from the streets she patrolled about the old lady who always baked lemon cake for the night shift. About the guy who loved his cats more than people. About the ones who were still kind in a town full of quiet sadness. One night, Mia woke up while Elena was still there. The little girl stood in the doorway of the living room, sleepy-eyed, clutching her pillow. Dad. Theo stood up immediately. Why are you awake, kiddo? Mia looked at Elena, then at the piles of papers on the table, then said the words that made both adults freeze. Is the police lady good or bad? Elena blinked. Theo was searching for a simple answer when Elena replied herself. Good, she said, kneeling down to Mia's level, but a little tired. Mia thought very seriously. Then she stepped forward and pushed her old stuffed bear into Elena's hands. Then you can borrow Teddy for a while. Dad says when you're tired you have to hug something. Theo didn't know who was more surprised, him or Elena. She took the bear as if it were something fragile. "Thank you, kiddo." Mia nodded, then turned to Theo. "Dad help her win, okay?" After that, the little girl went back to bed as if she had just given the most obvious mission in the world. Theo stood in the middle of the small living room watching Elena sit there with the lopsided stuffed bear in her lap, and suddenly realized if anything scared him more than the hearing coming up, it was the possibility that, after it was over, she would disappear from his life. All the documents were ready now. The hearing was only 4 days away. Theo knew this was the final battle. The hearing took place on Friday at 3 p.m. inside the civilian hearing room of the town council building. The room smelled of old carpet printer ink and overworked air conditioning. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. 2 rows of chairs held a few off-duty officers, a union representative, 1 local reporter, and the usual handful of people who liked watching other people's lives unfold. Sergeant Nolan Briggs sat on the right of Chief Mallory, uniform pressed to perfection, face calm to the point of arrogance. Elena sat on the left back, straight hands flat on the table. She did not look at Theo when he stood up from the back row and walked forward. No one in the room expected him to be there. That alone made the entire space pause. Briggs stared at him like an unwelcome error. Mallory frowned. The reporter lifted his head from his notebook. Theo placed a thick folder on the table in front of the chief. "Mr. Maddox," Mallory asked. Theo adjusted the microphone with a small movement and spoke in the same quiet, steady voice he used in the worst crisis rooms, the one that made people listen without being shouted at. "I am here to clarify that the evidence I provided did not come from the porch camera at the rental house as has been claimed. It came from public traffic cameras obtained through a lawful city records request." He slid forward the first document, a time-stamped confirmation case number and official email reply from the traffic division. Briggs sat up straighter. Theo continued without looking at him. "The footage shows Sergeant Briggs's vehicle stopped behind the convenience store on 5th Street at 8:47 a.m. The morning Officer Cruz's report disappeared. He stepped out holding a blue folder. The room stayed completely still. Theo moved to the second section, the cross-reference table of evidence discrepancies matched against Briggs's duty logs for 6 full months. "And this," he said, placing his finger on the top line, "is a pattern of inconsistencies large enough to require an external audit regardless of what this internal hearing decides about Officer Cruz's conduct." Briggs shot to his feet. "This is a fabrication by a civilian." Theo turned to look at him once. Only once. It was enough to make Briggs stop mid-sentence. "No," Theo said. "This is the record of an officer who was forced to document everything because her superior kept making evidence disappear." The words dropped like stones. Elena did not interrupt. She sat there calm, spine straight. Nothing like the emotionally unstable officer colluding with a civilian Briggs had tried to paint. When Mallory asked her to speak, she stood and delivered exactly what they had practiced for 4 nights. Short, factual, no extra emotion. She listed every discrepancy, every timestamp, every altered receipt, every report moved from the tray, every witness who had seen it. Given these inconsistencies, she finished voice level and strong. "I request that all personal charges against me be dropped and an independent audit of the evidence chain and storage be opened immediately." Mallory stared at the folder for a long time. He looked at Briggs once, looked at the reporter writing furiously once. Then he tapped his knuckles lightly on the table. "Request granted. Sergeant Briggs is suspended from administrative duties pending the completion of an external audit." Briggs went pale. He did not shout. He did not argue. He simply stood frozen the way a man does when he finally understands he has lost every advantage. Elena sat down slowly, Theo did not look at her yet. He waited for the room to empty, for the scrape of chairs, the murmur of voices, the reporter rushing outside to make calls. Only when they stepped out onto the front steps of the building did he see her hands tremble. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted across the steps. Ocean wind carried a cool edge. 2 young officers standing near the door gave Elena a quiet nod as she passed. No words were spoken, but everyone knew something had just changed. Elena stopped in the middle of the steps and turned to Theo. "You came to Carrillo Bay to rest. I did. And you turned your vacation into a war for me." Theo slipped his hands into his jacket pockets. "I have a habit of making bad decisions." Elena smiled. This time there was no guard left in it. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple brass key. She placed it in his palm. Theo looked down. "What is this?" "My house," Elena said, softly. "Small apartment near the water. The fireplace rattles like it wants to explode. The coffee maker is excellent. The kitchen window looks out at the ugliest wooden fence in town." She paused. "You're wasting money on that rental." Theo looked up. Below the steps, the reporter was still on the phone. The 2 young officers were still standing there. The whole small town would probably know what happened today before sunset. Elena understood that better than anyone. Yet she had given him the key right here. No hiding, no hesitation, no guessing. "Why now?" he asked. Elena met his eyes. "Because Briggs tried to turn you into proof that I was wrong." She stepped closer. "I want to turn you into proof that I chose right." Theo's chest tightened. He had thought the scariest thing was being pulled into this fight. He had been wrong. The scariest thing was a woman like Elena Cruz looking straight at the most exhausted, lonely, and broken parts of him, and still choosing him anyway. He closed his fingers around the key. His thumb brushed hers for 1 short second, long enough for both of them to stop breathing. "I have a daughter," he said, almost pointless. "I know. I'm not simple. I know. I'm not sure I know how to do this right." The corner of Elena's mouth lifted. "I didn't ask for right." Theo smiled. And for the first time since the day he lost his wife, the sound was lighter. Then he said, "I'll come. But Mia gets to judge your coffee maker." Elena raised an eyebrow. "I accept the risk." The wind from the bay blew in. Late sunlight painted a thin gold edge along her hair. And right there on the steps of the building where a small overthrow had just ended, Theo understood very clearly what he had once refused to name. He was no longer staying in this town just to rest. He was staying because a woman and a future here had made leaving the worst choice of all.